What's going on? I've installed a transmission cooler in my car and I want to share my complete installation with you. Specifically, I installed a thermostat controlled Mishimoto CVT cooler in my 2017 WRX with a CVT transmission. But even if you don't have this car or cooler, the installation will be very similar regardless of what you use, so be sure to stick around. In the video description, you'll find links to my pre-installation video in which I cover in detail the reasons behind needing a transmission cooler and much more. Also, you'll find links to every part you see me installing and more information that can be helpful if you're taking this project on. If this video is useful to you, support it by giving it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for more tutorials just like this. Let's get to it. So in order to remove the front bumper, we have to unclip the 9 pop clips underneath. You have to raise your car somehow. So I used Rhino ramps, but whatever you use, just make sure you follow your proper safety precautions. So let me show you the clips that we have to remove. Right here, we have the first one, right there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the same on the other side. You're also gonna have 2 push clips, one on each side inside the fender liner as you see here. So the way to get these out, you just push in on that pin in the middle. So find yourself an Allen wrench or something like this. Anything that can push on that little pin and just push the pin in. Once the pin is in, then you can remove the actual clip. So get a panel removal tool or something like that and kind of just pry underneath it to get it out. So once you get it out just a little bit, then you can just pop it out. When you go to put these back in, what you have to do is you have to push that pin out all the way like that. And then you can put it back in while the pin is out, and then you push the pin in to secure it. All of these clips on the bottom remove the same way. All you have to do is get a clip removal tool like this. Just get underneath it, pop it out. Okay, so once we remove those 11 pop clips from underneath the front bumper, we have to take out 3 pop clips from the top and 6 10mm bolts. So we're gonna take a ratcheting wrench and a 10mm socket, and we're gonna get to work. There we go. All of the bolts are the same, so you don't have to worry about where they came from. Set them aside, and now we can take out these 3 pop clips on top. Okay, so now that we removed those 6 bolts and the 3 pop clips on the top and the 11 pop clips securing the bumper to the bottom of the car, then we're ready to pull the bumper out. So we're gonna remove this top trim cover here, and we're gonna set that aside, and now we can pull the bumper out. Now we have to keep in mind that we have fog lights on either side of the bumper. We just wanna yank it out about 10 inches or so, just enough to get behind it so that we can unplug the fog lights, and then we can remove the bumper completely. So the bumper on either side is actually just clipped in place. So what we have to do, once we have all those clips out, we just have to pop it out from the clips right there. You can see them right there. So once we do that on both sides, we can pull the bumper outward. It's also clipped in place up here. So you have to kind of yank it out this way. It's gonna feel like you're breaking something, but you're not. You just have to give it a lot of force to pull it out. Just don't be afraid and get to this point right here and just pull it. Sounds like you broke it, but you didn't. It's just the clips. What I'm doing right now is just unplugging the fog lights. You have to push this right here. It can be difficult to push if it's really, really cold like it is in my garage right now. So you might need like a screwdriver or something metal to push that, and then it'll come out easily. All right, so let me give you a good view here of the bumper removed. Okay, so we're gonna install the cooler core behind and underneath this support bracket right here. So we're gonna remove that. It's pretty easy to do, but first we have to remove this air scoop. So we're gonna go ahead and grab a panel removal tool and just turn that center pin about 1/4 of the way until it pops out. Make sure you're only rotating the top part of it, because if you rotate the bottom part of it, then you're not doing anything. Just like that. So once that center pin is out and you can visibly see that it's out, then you can just remove the clip altogether. There we go. And we can just pull that right out of the way. So this plastic piece right here also comes off. So we have to unclip these pop clips on top. There's 6 of them. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and do now. Okay, so now this bracket should be able to come off now. Now we have to remove the support beam. So it's held in place by 8 10mm bolts. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same on the other side. So grab yourself your socket and wrench, and an extension will make this job a little easier. Bolts are all the same, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of them. Before we get much further with this installation, I want to talk a little bit about the placement of the core itself. So obviously this is our CVT cooler core, and the whole purpose of it is to spread out the surface area of your CVT fluid so that when air rushing through the fins right here hits it, then it cools the cooler and is sent it back to the transmission cooler. Now, this is a passive system, of course. It relies on the air coming in as you're driving your car. So it benefits from placement somewhere where it gets a wall of air. So obviously the best place to place it is right in front in here, because as you're driving, that's the place that gets the most air. I haven't seen a lot of these cars with front-mounted intercoolers, but if you do happen to have a front-mounted intercooler, then that's not going to be a possibility because that space is going to be taken up. So that ends up solving your problem as to what to put up there to retain the functional hood scoop, because you could just place this up there just like that. Of course, you're going to have to fabricate your own brackets for it and whatnot, but that's all part of the fun. And from there, it's a very easy run to the stock cooler, which is just below it over there, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, this obviously comes in a kit. So it has the brackets already, and this particular one gets placed just down here with the brackets pre-made and already figured out. But if you want to save some money and you end up getting a generic core and your own lines and hardware, and you want to put the kit together to save some money, then you're going to have to keep all these things in mind, and you're going to have to figure out where to mount the actual core, where to place the brackets and whatnot. It's not that complicated, but it is work that you'll have to do if you want to go down that route. It's something that I didn't want to deal with, so I bought a kit with those brackets already made and the work already figured out. So these are all good things to keep in mind when you're doing your research so that you can get the proper parts that best fit your particular build. To get to the intercooler, we have to first remove the engine cover. So there's 2 pop clips on the top, and then the engine cover is clipped on down here. So all you have to do is lift straight up. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen the 2 hose clamps. This one right here and that one right there. So you can use a flathead screwdriver or 8mm wrench. The intercooler is held in place by 2 brackets, this one right here and one underneath right here. And they use 4 12mm bolts to secure them in place. So you're gonna need a 12mm socket and wrench to get those out. This is what we end up with. So obviously the 2 long ones go to the top of the intercooler, and then the 2 short ones go right here. Of course, this bracket right here is holding this hose in place, so just unclip that and remove the bracket altogether. Now we can remove the intercooler. So it takes a little bit of wiggling to get it out of there. I find it easier to start on this side. Just make sure those hose clamps are pretty loose, and then kind of wiggle it out of that spot. There we go, so it's off on this side, and then you can kind of just wiggle it out of that other side too. So now with the intercooler removed, it exposes that bracket on the left side, so you're gonna need a 12mm socket and wrench to get it out. All right, now we're ready to move on with our installation. Okay, so what I have here is the thermostat that I'll be using with my installation. I bought the thermostat and I bought the thermostat mounting kit for it. You have to buy them separate. There's different configurations of this that you can get based on your needs, but this worked out the best for me. This part of the installation is entirely up to you whether you want to do it or not. It's not a mandatory thing, but I'm going to tell you why I did it, and I really elaborate on this on my pre-installation video that I put out, so please check that out for more information on this. I'm briefly going to touch on it now. This thermostat is going to allow only 10% of the fluid through to the aftermarket cooler while the car is warming up. Once it reaches 180 degrees, it's going to send 100% of the fluid through to the aftermarket cooler. The reason why you do that is to allow the transmission to come to temperature quicker. The only reason why I'm getting this thermostat is because I live in New York State. Just a few days ago, it was like negative 20 degrees. In those really cold days, I don't want to have to deal with waiting or keeping track of the transmission temperature. There's some important reasons why you should allow the transmission to come to temperature. Drivability of the transmission, lockup of the torque converter, and fuel economy are a few that come to mind. Like I said, not 100% necessary. If I lived in Florida, I would not be getting this at all. If I still lived in Virginia, I probably wouldn't be doing this either. But since I live in New York now, I think this provides the best peace of mind, since my particular goal is to keep the car as daily driver friendly as possible. So that's all I'm going to say about this. But if you decide to go down this route, I'm going to show you what you need to know. You're also going to need the barbs that come in this mounting kit. Comes with your mounting bracket, very critical. Obviously your 4 bolts for the mounting bracket, and then to mount it onto the car. I'll definitely go over this in detail here in a minute. So the way that this thermostat operates is you got to follow the arrows, right? The top portion of it right here is going to be your car side, your transmission side, right? So your hot transmission fluid is going to come in this way, following the directions of the arrows. And the bottom side is going to be the aftermarket cooler. That's going to be the transmission fluid coming from the aftermarket cooler back into your transmission, right? When this thermostat is closed, the fluid goes in through here and routes down this way and out that way. So it's just a loop that way. And it only sends 10% through to keep system pressure and to prevent air bubbles. Once this thermostat opens completely, then it sends all of the fluid through this way, through your aftermarket CVT cooler, and then back that way to your transmission. All right, so enough of that. So we have to put these barbs into place right here. And we're gonna do that by using thread seal tape with this, because it's just a necessary part of the installation. So I'm going to go ahead and put the thread seal tape onto the threads. You want to put it on in the direction that you're going to be threading. So we're going to be threading clockwise, obviously. So we're going to be putting the tape clockwise on the threads here. Then you're going to go ahead and thread it on to the piece, just like that. And you're going to use an 18mm socket to finish it off. Okay, so here we have the core, and we're gonna go ahead and put the brackets on there. So you're gonna need a 10mm socket and wrench and a 10mm wrench. So this is what it should look like when you're done. You're gonna end up flipping this upside down and mounting it just like this onto the car, and I'll show you that in a second. Before going on to the next step, I want to show you a couple of things here. Obviously we have our radiator core. These clamps right here came with the Mishimoto kit. If you get this thermostat, you're obviously going to need 4 more for the barbs. So I went and just upgraded all of them and just got 8. I just wanted something wider. These are the ones that came with the kit, and these are the ones that I got. I wanted something wider that would cover a little bit more surface area. Just for peace of mind, since they're so cheap, I just upgraded them anyways. What you see right here is high torque CVT fluid. Okay, you know that it's the high torque version because it's orange in color. There's only one place that you can get this CVT fluid, and that's the dealer. So you have to bring your own container and hope that they have it. So you might want to call ahead and ask them if they have it in stock. If you're not doing the installation in this car, then obviously get whatever fluid your transmission requires. But for this car, you have to get the high torque version of the CVT fluid. For me, in my area, there's 2 Subaru dealers. One did not have it at all. The other one luckily did. It cost me $18 for 1 quart, which you see right here. This stuff smells like death. Be very careful when you handle it. Make sure you wear rubber gloves. These right here are the hoses that come with a kit with the Mishimoto transmission cooler. Now, I was going to use these hoses, and then I came across a couple of reports of people saying that after about a year or so, the hoses start really looking kind of bad shape. So I didn't want to take the chance of one of these hoses deteriorating on me. It plays too much of an important role. Just to have peace of mind and know that they're going to be okay, I went ahead and just upgraded the hose. So I got this Vibrant hose, a dash 8AN hose. And it's just the right size. And this one has a braided shield, and it's a much higher quality hose. So with this one, it should last me the life of the car, and I'm not gonna worry about it after I install it. So I went ahead and just upgraded it anyways. It's something you have to keep in mind. And of course, I'll put the part number for this particular hose in the video description. Let's talk about the placement of the thermostat. So I realized two things. One, not everybody's going to install this cooler with a thermostat. So I'm going to talk about also how to do this installation without it, which is it's very simple. And also not everybody's going to have this intake right here. So you're going to have to figure out where to place this thermostat. Obviously you have the mounting bracket. It has several mounting options. So the whole point is you put the mounting bracket somewhere in the car, and then you can kind of just creep up the thermostat from underneath and secure it from the top. Okay, so that works out great if you know where to place it, if you find a good location for it. If you happen to have this intake, there is a perfect location for it that requires no modifications at all. These two holes right here align perfectly with those two screws on the intake. So this is exactly where I'm going to personally mount it. What I was thinking about before I realized that that aligned perfectly right there was to just put it right here. That would have required obviously making new holes. Might not necessarily be a good thing for everyone. So if I didn't have the Cobb intake at all, the two places where I would consider installing the thermostat if I'm using it would be on this beam right here, the support beam, or on the inside of the beam over here. So I'd have to remove the intake. There's a big gap in there and plenty of room to install this right on that beam like that. And it looks like it has a lot of room to route the hoses. More than likely, I would probably do it on the inside. It wouldn't be visible at all. Another place that I would consider would be on this side. I would move this ground bolt right here, move it out of the way and put it somewhere else, and maybe install the thermostat down there. There's perfect gap right there for it. Of course, these are hypothetical scenarios. I can't really tell you if these will work in practice without actually doing it, but these are the things that I would consider and the routes that I would probably take if I didn't have the Cobb intake. The only reason why I added these washers was because the head of those screws right there is actually smaller than the holes. So I didn't want to just rely on that plastic piece right there. So I just added that metal washer just to be extra safe. All right, so now we're ready for the fun stuff. Make sure you put some rubber gloves. You don't want to get any of this CVT fluid on your skin. When we remove the hose, some of the CVT fluid might spill out. So keep that in mind. If you want to protect the surface you're working on, put something underneath the car because a little bit might spill out. Get yourself some channel locks, and we're going to remove the stock hose from here. The hose we're looking at right here is this one. This is the return of the CVT cooler. This is the CVT cooler right here, and this right here is the return. So we want to remove this hose right here. So obviously use your channel locks. So now I gotta get the bottom side. So in the interest of making sure that not a lot of it spills out, since I'm not entirely sure how much is gonna come out, I'm gonna get the other replacement hose ready to just put in there. So I'm gonna put a hose clamp around it, and that way if a lot of it starts spilling out, then I can just plug in this hose in its place. So here's the hose. I have it ready to replace that one on the bottom. There we go. All right, so we have the replacement hose in there now.
Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and just wipe this up as much as I can. And I'm gonna make sure that the hose is all the way back, and I'm sliding that warm gear onto it. Like this. Okay. Now we have the outlet of the CVT cooler / warmer, and we install our own hose onto it. And now we have the return line right here, so we have to install the return line to it. Now, this is one continuous line as of right now, and it just helps to manage it when you do it that way. So all the way to that notch, then we can tighten it. All right, that's not going anywhere. So that's it. That's all you have to do on this side of it. So now we're gonna take these two lines and we're gonna plug them into the thermostat. If you don't have a thermostat, then obviously they'll go to the radiator core. So let me show you what that looks like. All right, so I have the hoses already plugged into the return line of the transmission and the output of the CVT warmer, the stock CVT warmer. So these are the two hoses right here. And I also already mounted the thermostat to the location where I said I would mount it. Pay attention to where the arrows are. If you notice, the top arrow is pointing in this direction and then the bottom arrow is pointing in that direction. That matters. So you want to put the output of the stock CVT cooler on the top. That's going that way. And then you want to put the return on the bottom right here. So the output of the CVT cooler is this hose right here. So that one's gonna go on top. I hate to have to cross them, but that's just the way that it works out. And the other one's gonna go on the bottom right here. So I'm gonna estimate how much I'm gonna need, and then I'm gonna mark it so I can cut these hoses. Now, like I said before, this is a single hose, it's looped around. Doing it this way ensures that you always have a long piece of hose available so you don't end up with fragments. I'm gonna put a high quality zip tie in here, and I'm gonna mark about where I'm gonna want this hose. So right about probably there. I'm gonna give it a little bit of slack, but not much, just a little bit of slack in case I need to move this. About that much. That's good, and I'll show you why I'm marking it like that here in a second. I'm gonna do the same with the bottom one. So now I'm gonna go ahead and cut these hoses to size. Now these are braided steel hoses, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use my Dremel to cut them. All right, so I have the hose clamps here. So remember, it's important that you get these hoses right. So the one coming out of the stock CVT cooler is gonna go on the top, and then the one coming out of the return line, that's that metal line on the top, that's gonna go on the bottom. So I'm gonna put that one on first. Now we're done with that side of the installation, and now we're worried about the cooler. So we reached the point now where we're gonna fill the core with the transmission fluid. Obviously get yourself a funnel that fits in the hole right there. This is exactly 1 quart, by the way. So we're gonna see how much it's gonna use, somewhere between half a quart and a quart. So we'll see how much we end up using, but we're gonna go ahead and start filling it. Make sure you put some gloves on and be extra careful so you don't spill it. So I'm looking on the other side just to see if I see the fluid. I don't want to overfill it, so I'm just gonna go slow. Oh, there it is. I think I may have overdone it by just a little bit. Okay, now I know that this thing is filled to the brim, which is perfectly fine because that's what we want. So I'm gonna take this opportunity and put this barb on there. You make sure that these face to the left. Also, you don't need the thread seal tape on these, but I just had to do it. Okay, so I went ahead and just extended the line out. If the hose has a natural bend in it, like this one does, then try to install it on there in the direction of the natural bend. Obviously, the hose is gonna be going that way, so I'm gonna use that natural bend. All right, so we're ready to mount the cooler, the cord to the bracket here. So for this part, you're obviously gonna need your 10mm socket and wrench, and then the wrench, and then you're gonna need 2 bolts and 2 screws from the kit that comes with a Mishimoto cooler. So you're gonna grab that metal piece that you took off the top here, and you can hold it just like I'm holding it, like this, if you do it this way anyhow, and set the cooler just like I have it there, and then you can insert it just like this. And these 2 holes are gonna align with the brackets. Okay, so we're gonna tighten those in a second, but this bracket right here, you're gonna notice that it aligns with that hole right there. That gets installed once you put the bracket back with the hardware that you took out of the car. Now we're gonna take that plastic shield, replace it up here. Then this is gonna end up upside down, obviously. So I'm gonna move the hose to the top. So the hoses are gonna go right through this gap right here, right through this gap right there. That's gonna be the direction the hoses are gonna go. So I'm gonna find the end of the hoses and I'm just gonna stick it through there. Okay, so let me show you what we did there with the lines. So here's the 2 lines that I just routed right here. And I did the same thing that I did on the other side. I put the zip tie on there, then I cut it with a Dremel and I put it on there and I secured it. On this side of it, it doesn't much matter which line goes to the top and which line goes to the bottom. On that side it does, but on this side it doesn't. So I'm pretty much done with the installation now. All I have to do now is reinstall the intercooler. That way I can turn on the car and circulate the fluid and make sure there's absolutely no leaks. Obviously you have to have the intercooler plugged in for that. But I'm not gonna put on the bumper or anything else before I at least circulate that fluid and make sure that there are no leaks. I'm pretty confident with my installation, but you never know. Better safe than sorry. But what I wanna do now is give you a quick little tour of what this installation looks like completed and tell you what it would look like if you didn't have the thermostat and if you did a bypass installation instead. So let me show you the cooler itself. There's the cooler right in the middle. It's right in the middle. It's solid in there. It's not going anywhere, and it gets a wall of air, so it's very effective at what it does. Let me show you the lines. There's the lines right there. There's another line. Okay, so I routed the lines right down there and right here on the side of the headlight. Right, so there's the headlight right there. So the lines go right there on the side, and they come out right there. I put a zip tie on them to keep one on top and one on the bottom to make it neater. And then they go right to the thermostat. Top line right here is going to the stock cooler. Down there. You can see it right here going to the stock cooler. Okay. And then the bottom line right there is going to the return line right here. If you did a regular installation without a thermostat, you simply wouldn't have the thermostat there. And I know that sounds like common sense, but what I mean is that this top line will go from here to here, and then the bottom one will go from there to there, as if the thermostat wasn't there. That's the only difference. Now, if you did a bypass installation, that line that's going to the stock cooler, instead of going to the stock cooler down there, that line would go to right here. So you would have one line going to here and one line going to there. Okay, those are these 2 lines that are going back. These 2 lines right here that are going back to the transmission. All right, so you basically would have a direct link from one side to the other to the Mishimoto or whatever cooler you have in the front. Obviously, that's going to expose the 2 barbs on the stock warmer slash cooler, so you'd have to get caps for that and cap it, and it'll just sit there doing nothing. But that's what it would look like if you wanted to do a bypass installation. So let me put back this intercooler and test out this puppy.
Before fully reassembling everything, it's a good idea to warm up the car and look for leaks. You might smell some CVT fluid as the little bit of fluid that spilled burns off. When you're satisfied, reinstall your removed parts in reverse order. If you stuck with me this whole video, I hope you got something out of it, and be sure to save it as a reference for when you do your own install. While this mod doesn't add power or affect the look of the car, it does provide a little peace of mind, and hopefully it will extend the life of the transmission. If you have any questions, I'll see you in the comments section, and as always, thanks a lot for watching, and take care.